Mr. George told me I should practice before concert band tomorrow. I guess that means I probably should. Alright, let's go find a room. Aha! I have found the perfect room. Okay, Martha, it's time to practice our new music. Oopsie daisy, I forgot to eat lunch. I guess you don't mind if I eat in here then. Cream cheese. Oh no! I have a test in Intro to Social Studies later and I didn't study! That's okay. I guess I can study while I'm in here. Why don't I put on some really cool tunes while I study? Whoops! I dropped my food on the ground! Oh well, it's not like Mr. George is gonna find out. Hey man, you're done. In my office. Now. No! Okay, that may have been a little extreme. Hey everyone, my name is Aiden Torres, and today I'm here to give you some general guidelines and tips for whenever you're using the practice rooms at Fenton High School. Now if you don't go to Fenton, that's completely fine. I'm sure most of these tips and guidelines will apply to your school as well. Just be sure to ask your directors first for anything that may be more specific to your practice rooms. At Fenton, we have what's called the Be Real guidelines, and that's what I'm going to be using to help make this video today. Up first, we have the letter R, which stands for responsible. To meet this, don't be like our friend in the skit. Don't bring food into your practice rooms. Don't worry, I'm guilty of it myself. As a vice band director once told me, chicken sauce and pianos don't go together. Now, the chances are that if you're using the practice rooms, it's probably during your bison time, which runs from 9:30 to about 10:15 with announcements. Just eat some food before you go practice, or at the very least, eat food in that little hallway that leads up to the practice rooms. That way you can avoid any and all mishaps with food. Plus, if you play a wind instrument, it's gonna smell like your lunch from last Thursday. And that's just kinda gross. It's also a good idea to just respect your practice rooms. Yes, we're aware that some of the pianos are vandalized. Just leave them be. The only thing you need to do in the practice rooms is to practice in a little smaller and private area. Anything that's in the practice rooms and anything you bring into the practice rooms is your responsibility. So please, just treat everything with respect. Moving along, we have the letter E, which stands for engaged. Whenever you're using the practice rooms, it's always a good idea to, well, practice. I know it can be especially hard to sit down and practice your instrument, but let me tell you, it pays off. As many musicians have told me over the years, sometimes the hardest part of practicing is just putting your instrument together. Try coming up with a practice plan, and try to avoid using any devices unless you're using a device for recording, as a metronome, or you're listening to a recording. In that case, just use your device for those purposes only, as you can very well be distracted quite easily, especially in a practice room. Once you get past all the first steps, try setting goals for yourself. That way you can leave the practice room knowing you're ready for your next rehearsal. Our next letter is A, which stands for appropriate. The last thing you want to be when practicing is distracted, so don't become a distraction for others. Please keep the practice room doors shut tightly. These rooms are designed so you can play in a much more private space. While you can still hear yourself in the room, other people can hear you outside as well, so it's a great idea to just keep the door closed. If someone knocks at your door, don't be rude about it, especially if it's a staff member or a director. Instead, open the door and see if you can answer whatever question they may have for you in a nice manner. Finally, just have some courtesy when you're in the practice rooms. Don't go bugging others or blasting loud music. This is the easiest way to be told on and kicked out. People are in the practice rooms to practice and get out. You don't want to make anything harder for them. Finally, we have L, which stands for learner. Each time you go to practice, you should always be ready to learn something new, even if it's as subtle as maybe learning a new scale or something. Now, every musician has their own way of playing an instrument, but it's always a really good idea to ask for some feedback on how you're playing. For an easy way to do this, try recording yourself and see how you sound. Luckily, if you're in concert band or symphonic winds, there are regular playing assessments in which you sit down and play an excerpt for Mr. George, and he gives you feedback. Now, if you aren't in either of these, it's just generally a good idea to ask someone to listen to you, and they can give you some feedback. There are teachers that generally come by the practice rooms and, teach students. I think those would be very great people to go and ask to hear you play, especially if they're teaching an instrument that you play yourself. Going back to more personal practice, it's always a good idea to take notes on the music that you're playing. Always, always, always have a pencil with you. Pencils are your best friend whenever you have music. Or if you're using an online program, have an annotating app open such as Cami. It doesn't just make Mr. George happy to see notes on music, but it ultimately benefits you whenever you mark your music. That way you can remember something, whether it's a fingering, symbol, or a funny Italian word, as Mr. George likes to put it. And finally, just have fun with it. Practicing shouldn't have to be a burden, because then you don't get anything out of it. I know it'll take quite a while to become proficient at an instrument, but with enough practice and time, you too can play just like the professionals. Thank you so much for watching this video. It was a lot of fun putting this together, and I hope you can take some tips that I gave in this video with you whenever you go to practice again. Take care, everybody, and of course, go Bison.